Welcome to Philosophy of Value Workshops number 45 of Series 5. The question today is meaning in life more dependent on truth, objectivity, experience or value? The reading from one of my works, The Pursuit of Value, Chapter 5, Section 2. Okay, so this is the last of the last workshop of Series 5 of the workshops on value and consciousness with a particular principle of value. So Series 6 starts next week and it will be on the same issues but more focused, and the format will be slightly different. So today we're talking about meaning in life in terms of a pursuit of value, and I have given several presentations on meaning in life in relation to value. And this one is a rehearsal for one to be given to the Melbourne Existentialist Society. And today I want to pay a particular attention to the relation of meaning, objectivity and truth. Yet, especially on this neglected topic of meaning, we need to first define our terms. We must define or distinguish epistemic meaning, as in what does this sentence mean, from the experiential meaning of meaning in life that we're talking about today. Also, meaning of life implies that there is some inherent meaning that we can discover, whereas meaning in life is something to be worked out the best we can. Another distinction is between meaning and purpose. I take it that meaning incurs some kind of felt experience that extends through time. Purpose, though, is directed towards some objective that may or may not result in meaning. I will be talking about both meaning and purpose as expressions of value. And finally, like others, the concept of meaning is an anthropocentric construction subject to variation. It is subject to different historical, philosophical and other possible interpretations, just like other concepts such as truth, beauty, freedom, justice, rights, God and the moral good. Yet there are also other ways that we can define and describe the character of meaning. One of these is by comparison and contrast to ethics, which is another primarily value-based activity. Firstly, we can say that meaning in life is susceptible to facts in my life. That is, to find my life's work is useless, or that my wife doesn't love me, can drain my life of meaning. We might argue that it need not, but facts nevertheless usually affect meaning. But ethics has a way of evading facts by saying that my actions were moral because I had good intent. Utilitarians would disagree, but Kantians and others would agree on the significance of moral intent. Secondly, meaning is an embracing attitude that can be said to colour every aspect of my life. But ethics typically makes judgments about specific aspects of life deemed to be ethical. Virtue ethics would disagree, but even they would distinguish different virtues. Value is another contentious notion with different types of value like motivational, moral and perspectival value. Yet we can assume a working knowledge of value, of what value is, with examples like wanting, loving, liking and hating. We can also define value ostensively in its various functions. For example, a meaningful life is also a worthwhile and valuable life, and ethical principles are values that guide moral action. And against logical positivism, values of some kind can be found in every aspect of human action. Yet, paradoxically, both the concepts of value and meaning have been neglected in history and in philosophy. To move quickly through this paper, I'll refrain from arguing this point here, but this neglect is illustrated in the involvement of value in the main theories of ethics. For example, in Aristotelian ethics, we value excellence of character, or in Kantian ethics, we value reason, intention, and duty. And in utilitarianism, we value happiness. But there is no publicized value theory ethics which advocates the principle that we should value value. This is another argument that needs to be extended elsewhere. Yet, as a reference point, Robert Nozick spoke of valuing values. I'm talking about valuing value. But there is also a neglect of the idea of meaning in life, as shown by the paucity of serious work on the subject. Most philosophers have commented on meaning, but only a few have a theory of meaning, like Viktor Frankl, Rollo May, Albert Camus, Ninian Smart, Susan Wolfe, Ernest Becker, and Owen Flanagan. David Wiggins provides us with an academic account of cognitivist and non-cognitivist theories of meaning. Cognitivism explains activities like morals, motivation, and meaning in terms of reason and perception. Following Hume, non-cognitivists explain such activities in terms of feeling and affect. Wiggins describes a non-cognitivist account of the myth of Sisyphus as having values injected into his veins. Now, Wiggins says a lot that we can't repeat here, but he raises two important points for our discussion. One, an association of a non-cognitivist theory of meaning with values. Two, the difficulty of incorporating truth and objectivity into a theory of meaning. Wiggins is critical of both cognitivist and non-cognitivist theories of meaning, but he argues that non-cognitivists cannot appeal to objectivity that they need without contradiction. That is, their theory of meaning must appeal to objectivity to make it stick, which is essentially a cognitivist claim. Another criticism that Wiggins makes of a non-cognitivist theory of meaning is that it neglects outcome. And meaning is susceptible to facts such as the outcomes of our actions as well as objectivity. In my view, the problems of truth and objectivity can be resolved in their replacement by normativity and coherence, and that normativity and coherence can be based on structures of consciousness and value. Moreover, there is a tradition of a certain indifference to outcomes that I would like to take further. This thinking is found in Christianity, Kant, Hegel, and in G.K. Chesterton's view that in order to succeed, a soldier or anyone must seek his life in a spirit of furious indifference to it. I myself frame this attitude as a certain independence or sufficiency of value. Yet many religious and philosophical views appeal to objectivity quite straightforwardly to establish meaning. For example, Susan Wolfe holds that values must be established objectively as part of the fabric of the world. Iris Murdoch also holds that values are objectively fixed in relation to external reality. And Robert Nozick and Ronald Dworkin also have objectivist conceptions of value. Against these views stands an existentialist outlook and John Mackey's view that there are no objective values. Yet there are other considerations about appealing to objectivity in order to establish meaning. To begin with, the content of the objectivity that is appealed to is always contingent in both theory and practice. That is, even if the content is objective, its application and function is contingent. That is, the intrinsic content of those ideas are contingent and interchangeable with other ideas. That is, the facts in your life that give it meaning have value because you have invested value in those facts. And the truth in philosophy that guides your thoughts and values depends upon your philosophical insight. And the truth in God varies between polytheism, monotheism, and the latest theological development. Yet the objectivity of ideas that support meaning can also be in question. With respect to the concept of truth, there is no definitive theories of truth or final conception of truth. Choices must be between correspondence, coherence, and other theories of truth that incur subjectivity. And there is no final truth in any sphere, whether mathematics, science, humanities, or religion. For example, Whitehead reminds us that no metaphysic is definitive and that every philosophy will suffer a deposition. And Karl Popper gives us the falsifiability criterion that genuine science must be falsifiable. Yet, as just noted, more significantly, references to truth in the pursuit of meaning can only be subjective. That is, it's not the intrinsic content of the idea that affords meaning, but the meaning that we attribute to it. My point is that appeals to objectivity to establish meaning must ultimately return to subjectivity. This restates the existentialist and postmodernist problem of seemingly attaching values to anything. And there is another problem of subjectivity in establishing experiences of meaning. That is, the experience of meaning can be evoked physiologically by chemical changes in, for example, taking a pill. Yet the reasons why one is experiencing meaning affect the quality of that meaning. However, that influence will depend on the discernment and values of the individual. So in my view, both the appeal to objectivity and the physiological experience of meaning imply questions of value. Moreover, the related question of purpose as an objective is also susceptible to choices of value. In this way, I want to present an account of value which produces both meaning and purpose, and that value can provide a direction in life strong enough to be a purpose. And I want to frame that direction in terms of a pursuit of value. Kant wanted to make moral values binding through the constraints of reason. But Philippa Foot and others found his categorical imperative to be only a hypothetical imperative. We should again consider how facts like Kant's imperative reveal only contingent significance. And we must ask how we can constrain values for systems of morals, meaning and purpose. Others have sought direction from intrinsic values, supposedly like life, consciousness, or the goodwill. But even if such were intrinsic values, the question is still open of why must we act on them. G.E. Moore and Robert Nozick defined intrinsic values by their organic unity or internal coherence. But these lack experimental content and again leave open the question of acting on them. An unexpected constraint on values is found in Sartre's notion of being condemned to choose or condemned to be free. On Sartre's view, we are so constrained because freedom, choice and values are essential to consciousness. I'll outline this point shortly, but such value is nevertheless devoid of content. Yet Sartre's notion of the spirit of seriousness takes the idea of value content further in several ways. The spirit of seriousness is to treat subjective values as objectives, as either principles or objects. This is regarded as being done inauthentically to avoid freedom and responsibility. The classic example is to say in bad faith, I have no choice. Firstly, inauthentic avoidance of freedom and responsibility in bad faith have experiential implications. We can say that the agent's experience of quality and meaning in life has been degraded. Secondly, affirmation of the idea that I have no choice mistakes that idea for an objective fact or objective value. This is a failure of value or a failure to value for at least two reasons. One, to say I have no choice is a refusal to choose, which is a fundamental property of value. Two, it is also a failure of value because it is valuing a principle which has no value in itself. Thirdly, to take subjective values as objective is a contradictory and erroneous position. It is erroneous as well as contradictory because of the nature of consciousness and value, to be noted shortly. These points support the idea of value giving direction, purpose and meaning to life. And this idea can be expressed as the pursuit of value, the value of value, and the will to value. Yet there are other reasons why the value of value promotes meaningful experience. The value of value has a proclivity towards substantive values like moral fortitude and magnanimity. And the value of value promotes a synthesis or individuation, as Jung called it, that constitutes meaning. Also, the value of value entails that we choose or affirm value as an objective or purpose in life. But why should we? And why should we adopt a value-oriented system rather than some other? One reason is that value satisfactions are ultimately inescapable but not mandatory or necessary. This claim involves the long-standing cognitive non-cognitive debate that we can't reenact here, but I can point to the inadequacy of states like cognition and affect in establishing value and meaning. Moreover, the arguments above encourage choosing a principle in the form of a will to value because 1. The internal coherence of value as a system of value seems to call for a will to value. 2. To value physical or cognitive objects instead of value states is ultimately regressive. 3. To not value or affirm value is itself contradictory, self-negating and self-defeating. The idea of not affirming value as contradictory, self-negating and self-defeating implies self-validation. Self-validating a priori principles are the holy grail of systems of thought, but they do exist. Self-validating principles are used to justify logic and mathematics, but not thought possible in physics or ethics. Logic is determined by the self-evident and self-validating truths of Aristotle's 4 basic principles of logic. David Hilbert describes mathematics as avoidance of contradiction and is therefore a self-validating a priori. A self-validating system within the human sphere is Descartes' I think, therefore I am. Physics isn't self-validating because it's an a posteriori system of contingent observations. Mathematics and logic are self-validating, but they can't establish principles for systems of physics or ethics. But I propose that the will to value is self-validating because the alternative is contradictory and self-negating. And systems of value need a self-validating principle due to problems such as posed by Hume. I've just noted 2 reasons why not to value value is contradictory, self-negating and self-defeating. 1. A failure to value value is found in a refusal to choose, which is a fundamental property of value. 2. Valuing objects or principles as intrinsic values is regressive, contradictory and simply erroneous. These and other claims presuppose structures of consciousness and value that I haven't yet discussed, at least not in this paper. Normativity and coherence presuppose structures of consciousness that can constrain and direct value. I earlier mentioned Sartre's notion of being condemned to choose as a negative constraint. Another constraint is found in the insubstantiality of consciousness and the virtue of independent or sufficient value. With this value, I'm no longer talking about a lack of objectivity as a problem that we have to resolve, but that a lack of objectivity is a virtue and that an excess of objectivity is debilitating and self-indulgent. But that view hangs on account of consciousness and value that I haven't got time to discuss here. Yet I can note Georges Bataille's metaphor of mind as water in a bottle extended to liquid in a vessel. Here, the walls of the vessel are cognitive frameworks which support and shape the mental liquid. Our issue is the independence of the value states and the degree of support they require. On the different question of the origins and ubiquity of value, I can take another argument from Sartre. Like Heidegger, Sartre states that the being of the self as consciousness is value, and that reflective consciousness cannot arise at the same time without disclosing values. Sartre builds on the idea of contrast, choice and selection as constituents of both value and consciousness. He holds choice as not just preference, but a selection traced back to its ontological foundation. And that, I quote, every choice supposes elimination and selection, thereby producing value. Sartre wants to trace selection to its ontological foundation, but he doesn't seem to do this explicitly. But we can explain and extend the notions of choice and selection with the concept of contrast. Monotone is inimical to selection, choice, value, perception, and indeed to consciousness. The capacities need contrast like a black spot on a white board. We can then say that every perception entails contrast, selection, and value. We look one way and make a selection and preference that produces both negation and affirmation. Selection entails preference and value. Elimination implies contrast as a precondition of value. Now, these may be just nascent values, yet that is to be expected when we are explaining the origins of value. The point is that value is ubiquitous in every aspect of our mental lives, and that choice, value, and consciousness are coexistent. Martin Heidegger and Edmund Husserl offer another account of time that also reveals the inescapability of value. Heidegger emphasized temporality and time as the horizon of being. Husserl spoke of the flow of consciousness and the flow of becoming, in which every experience has necessarily been preceded in time by experiences. We find ourselves in a world of time or temporality, as well as diversity, divisibility, selection, and choice. The diversity of the world demands selections and choices that produce value. Yet consciousness is also moving through time as well as through diversity in space, and values must be continually produced to cope with the flow of existence. Valuing value and the will to value is therefore an inescapable property of consciousness. One outcome of this view of structure, consciousness, choice and value is that value isn't just a contingent aspect of life, but is an inherent part of human existence as consciousness. Therefore we must choose, and ultimately we must choose value as a progenitor of meaning and purpose in our lives. Okay, thank you very much. You might like to give me your feedback, your criticisms and comments in one of my websites like meetup.com, philosophy of value workshops.